There is an 11-minute episode of a children's cartoon broadcast on Cartoon Network on January 8th, 2015, where two cartoon brothers stand on a sidewalk and ask the planets of the solar system what the meaning of life is. The planets answer with a jazz number titled, "Your Life Doesn't Count," which explains in cheerful, close harmony that human existence is microscopically insignificant on a cosmic scale. By the time the song ends, billions of years have passed, and the sun explodes and destroys the entire solar system. The show does not comment on this. The next scene is about mayonnaise. That episode is the entire show. It is also, almost word for word, what Albert Camus wrote in Paris in 1942. The show is The Amazing World of Gumball. It ran on Cartoon Network from May 3rd. 2011 to June 24th, 2019, 240 episodes across 6 seasons, 8 years on the air, then a 6-year silence, then a quiet revival on Hulu in the summer of 2025. The book is Le Mythe de Sisyphus, The Myth of Sisyphus, published in French in 1942 in the middle of the German occupation of Paris. The show is about a blue cat named Gumball Watterson living in a town called Elmore in California, where the laws of physics work intermittently and the universe is openly hostile to the residents. The book is about a Greek hero condemned by the gods to push a boulder up a mountain for eternity, watch it roll back down, and start again. They are about the same thing. In places, they are almost the same sentences. Almost no one has ever pointed this out. Tonight, you will hear it pointed out. Before we go further, a quick note: if you enjoy long-form sleep essays like this, 1. Subscribing helps the channel keep going. It costs nothing and takes about 3 seconds. Now, where were we? Camus, Paris, 1942. A rock. Albert Camus opens The Myth of Sisyphus with a sentence that has, in 84 years, lost none of its capacity to stop a reader cold. There is, he writes, only one really serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide. Everything else, he says, comes after. Whether the world has 3 dimensions or 9, whether the mind has 9 categories or 12. Those are games. The serious question is whether life is worth living, and answering that question, for Camus, is the only thing philosophy is for. He is 28 years old when he writes this. He is living in a country occupied by a foreign army. He has tuberculosis. He is working on a novel about a man who feels nothing at his mother's funeral and shoots an Arab man on a beach because the sun is too bright. The novel is called L'étranger, The Stranger. He publishes both books in the same year. The Stranger first in May, The Myth of Sisyphus second in October. They are companion pieces. The novel shows you a man who has stopped pretending. The essay tells you what to do once you have also stopped. What Camus is asking in the simplest possible form is this: the universe is silent. It does not care about you. It does not have a plan for you. It will not, in the end, justify the time you have spent inside it. You, however, are an animal that requires meaning the way other animals require water. You wake up each morning expecting your life to mean something. You will go to your job and expect it to mean something. You will love a person and expect that to mean something. The universe, every time, will fail to confirm any of it. Camus calls the gap between your need for meaning and the universe's refusal to provide it the absurd. Not absurd in the comic sense. Absurd in the original sense, from the Latin absurdus, out of tune, off key, a wrong note in a song that should have made sense and didn't. The absurd, for Camus, is not a property of the universe. It is not a property of you. It is the relationship between the two. It is what happens when a creature that demands meaning is placed inside a system that does not provide any. The absurd is a divorce. The absurd is the moment you realize that you and the world have, all along, been speaking different languages, and the world is never going to learn yours. Now consider the episode again, Season 3, Episode 28. 2 children full of cereal sugar, standing on a sidewalk, Gumball Watterson, 12 years old, blue cat, voiced at the time by Jacob Hopkins. Darwin Watterson, 10 years old, his adopted brother, a goldfish that has grown legs. They have, in the cold open, just consumed an enormous quantity of artificial marshmallows from a cereal called Smashmallows, smuggled inside Gumball's sweater after their mother Nicole tried to throw the cereal away for being unhealthy. They are, by the time the title card appears, riding a chemical wave that the show animates as a sequence of euphoric oneness with the universe. They feel, briefly, that they understand everything. Then the sugar wears off. They wake up in an Elmore parking lot. Gumball is wearing a ballerina outfit. Darwin is handcuffed to a streetlight. They look at each other and they ask, very simply, what the point of any of this is. What is the meaning of life? The episode then proceeds for 10.5 minutes to ask everyone in town that question. A man named Larry, who works at the gas station, says the meaning of life is work. He demonstrates by listing his routine: get up, shower, come to work all day, go home, go to sleep. Get up, shower, come to work all day, go home, go to sleep. He repeats this until he twitches, takes the money out of the register, throws away his hat and name tag, and walks off camera. The boys watch him go. Gumball says, seems to work for him. A young boy named Alan, a balloon, says the meaning of life is to be good to others, because if you help someone, then one day they might help someone else, and the world will be a better place. As he says this, 2 bullies are dismantling his lemonade stand. He is hit in the face, he turns to the boys, asks them to help, and they walk away. A coach at the school, a giant football helmet, tells them the meaning of life is to find yourself by walking the harshest deserts, crossing the most dangerous seas, and climbing the highest mountain. Gumball says he is too lazy for any of that. A woman in their kitchen, asked what the meaning of life is, removes her sunglasses, her eyes turn red, the background bursts into flames, and she says in a demonic voice that the meaning of life is to crush your enemies. See them quiver before you, and hear the lamentation of their women. The line is, of course, lifted from Conan the Barbarian. The woman is Nicole Watterson. The mother, the boys do not seem alarmed. They have asked the wrong woman. A skydiver who has been falling for 70 seconds, played as a ghost mid-fall, tells them the meaning of life is to live as fast as you can. He explains that his life was great for 70 seconds, and then very, 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 very bad for a couple of seconds. He asks them, would you rather live life to the fullest for 70 seconds, or live a boring life for 70 years? The boys, in unison, answer 70 years. Gumball clarifies straight up. The skydiver yells at them not to leave because it is boring where he is going. His parachute then opens. He says, darn, now you work. These are not isolated jokes. These are, item by item, a checklist of every answer European philosophy has produced to the question of meaning, demolished one at a time in a kids' show on a Thursday night on a network owned by Time Warner. The work answer, Larry, is the bourgeois answer that Camus directly mocks in the essay, the one he writes about as rising, streetcar, 4 hours in the office, meal, streetcar, 4 hours of work, meal, sleep. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, according to the same rhythm. The benevolence answer, Alan, is the religious answer. The leap of faith Camus called philosophical suicide. The vision quest answer, coach, is the romantic answer, the climb the mountain, find your true self. The will to power answer, Nicole, is the Nietzschean answer, played for laughs. The hedonism answer, the skydiver, is the Epicurean answer, played for terror. Every answer fails. The boys ask the entire planet Earth and find no satisfying response. Then, because this is a show, they take their last shot. They sit down on a bench next to a tall, wide-eyed girl named Sussy, a chin with eyes drawn on it, who throughout the series has functioned as a kind of holy fool. Sussy, asked the meaning of life, gives them an unexpectedly articulate answer. She says, life is about the journey and making friends along the way. Then she says, the true meaning of life is finding your own way to enjoy it. Then she throws mayonnaise at pigeons. Mr. Small, the school counselor, slips on the mayonnaise. The boys laugh. The episode ends. You can read it as a children's show, settling, in the last 30 seconds, for a comforting platitude after 11 minutes of nihilism. Find your own way to enjoy it. Friendship is the meaning, standard kids' television resolution. Or you can read it the way the writers almost certainly intended, which is the way Camus wrote about Sisyphus. There is no answer to the meaning of life that is going to satisfy the part of you that is asking. The universe is not going to spell out a purpose for you in fire across the sky. What is left after every system has failed is the local, the small, the absurd, the journey, the friend on the bench, the mayonnaise on the counselor. You make your own way to enjoy it, you throw the mayonnaise, you imagine yourself happy. That is, almost in those words, the last paragraph of the myth of Sisyphus. Camus writes that the struggle itself toward the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. One must, he writes, imagine Sisyphus happy, not because Sisyphus has solved his problem. The rock still rolls back. The mountain is still there. The gods are still indifferent. Sisyphus is happy because he has stopped expecting the universe to give him a reason and started providing his own. He is, by the end of the essay, doing exactly what Sussy does on the bench. He is finding his own way to enjoy it. The same year Camus published this, he also published The Stranger. The novel opens with one of the most quoted sentences in 20th century literature. Mother died today, or maybe yesterday. I don't know. The narrator, Meursault, will go on to attend his mother's funeral without crying, begin a relationship the next day, watch a stranger beat a dog, and shoot a man on a beach because the heat is unbearable. He is convicted not for the murder, but for his refusal to perform grief. The court cannot accept that a person could fail to feel what a person should feel at his mother's funeral. He is sentenced to die. In the cell, the night before his execution, he opens his heart to what he calls the gentle indifference of the world. He is happy. He has stopped pretending the world owes him explanations. He has, in his last hours, become Sisyphus. There is, on the wall of every Watterson bedroom, every Watterson kitchen, every Watterson hallway across 240 episodes, a kind of low-grade Meursault energy. The family is by any sane standard surrounded by absurdity. Gumball is a cat, Darwin is a goldfish that walks. Nicole, the mother, is also a cat. Richard, the father, is a rabbit. Anais, the 4-year-old daughter, is a smaller pink rabbit who is the smartest member of the family. The family lives in a town where the laws of physics break casually, where a character can lose a limb on Tuesday and have it back on Thursday, where the local handyman is a sentient cloud, where the school is run by a baboon, and where the universe, on more than one occasion, openly tries to delete one of the residents. None of them appears to find this strange. None of them ever stops to say, "This is a strange place to live." They get up, they go to school, they argue at dinner, they laugh. The cat goes to sleep. The next day, the rock starts at the bottom of the hill again. That is what Camus meant by the absurd. Not that the world is funny, not that the world is cruel, that the world is silent, that the demand for meaning will never be met, and that the only honest response is to keep going anyway, awake to the silence, refusing both despair and false hope, finding what beauty there is in the descent. Gumball Watterson does this every Thursday night for 8 years, 44 episodes a season, 11 minutes each, on a basic cable schedule from a studio in West London called Cartoon Network Studios Europe, in a creative environment that nobody in the company seemed to fully understand. The show kept arriving, the show kept getting away with it. The question we are about to spend the next 2 hours on is how this happened and what it means. Why a French philosopher writing under occupation in 1942 and a British animator working in West London in 2011 ended up making the same argument in different mediums, 89 years apart. Why the highest rated children's cartoon on European Cartoon Network for most of the 2010s was, in its bones, a sustained absurdist treatise. Why a generation of children, now in their late teens and early 20s, grew up internalizing, and why, when the show ended in 2019 on a freeze frame of its main villain falling screaming into the void of forgotten things, that ending was the most Camusian gesture in the history of American television. Stay with me. Lie still. The story takes a while. The first thing to understand about the absurd, the way Camus uses the word, is that it is not the same thing as the world being weird. Many things are weird. A platypus is weird. The fact that octopuses can taste with their arms is weird. Quantum mechanics is weird. None of those things are absurd in Camus' sense. The absurd is not a property of any single object. It is a relationship. Specifically, it is a relationship between a creature that needs the world to make sense and a world that does not, in the end, owe that creature any sense. Camus describes this relationship using the metaphor of a stage. Imagine he says that one morning the scenery collapses, the walls of the stage fall away, the chair you have been sitting in turns out to be made of paper. Behind it, there is nothing. You are not in a room. You have never been in a room. You are an actor who has been performing in a play that did not have an author. That moment of collapse is the absurd. It is not a tragedy. It is not a comedy. It is just suddenly seeing. What Camus says next is a part of the essay that often gets quoted out of context. He says that once you have seen this, you have 3 options. The first is suicide, which he immediately dismisses, not on moral grounds, but on logical ones. Suicide, for Camus, is a confession that the absurd has won. It is to admit that life without preordained meaning is not worth continuing. He spends the first quarter of the essay explaining why this is wrong. The second option, which he spends the next quarter of the essay dismantling, is what he calls philosophical suicide. This is the leap of faith. This is what you do when you cannot stand the silence, and so you fill it. You decide that the universe must mean something, that there must be a God, or a destiny, or a hidden order beneath the chaos, and you live as if your decision had been a discovery. Camus respects the people who do this. He has tender, almost loving things to say about Kierkegaard, who is the patron saint of the leap of faith. He just thinks Kierkegaard is wrong. Camus' word for what Kierkegaard did is escape. The third option, the only honest one, is to live with the absurd, to keep your eyes open, to refuse both suicide and false hope, to go on building a life fully aware that the building has no foundation. He calls this revolt. He uses the word the way a French writer in 1942 would have used it, which is to say, with full awareness of resistance, of saying no, of refusal under occupation. To live, for Camus, is to revolt against meaninglessness without ever pretending it has been defeated. This is, almost line for line, the unstated premise of every episode of The Amazing World of Gumball. The premise is not that the world makes sense and the characters need to learn it. The premise is that the world does not make sense, will never make sense, and that the family at the center of the show has decided to live in it anyway. Watch any episode you like. The premise is intact in all of them. In Season 1, Episode 1, the DVD The Family Rents a Movie destroys it and spends the episode trying to hide the destruction from Nicole. The premise of that episode is that the universe will allow a DVD to be physically replaced if the right rituals are performed. By Season 3, the premise has scaled. By Season 6, the premise is that the universe is itself a TV show that may or may not be cancelled, depending on whether the characters discover their own fictionality. The arc of the show, from the DVD to the Inquisition, is the arc of a family slowly waking up to how strange the world is and choosing, every time, to keep going. This is again what Camus means by the absurd. Not that the world is broken and needs to be fixed. That the world is broken and the only honest response is to live in it anyway, with one's eyes open, refusing the temptation to look away. It is, if you read enough Camus, almost impossible not to start seeing it everywhere. Once the divorce has been pointed out, you cannot unsee it. The world stays exactly as silent as it was the day before. You are the one who has changed. From now on, when the planets sing about the meaninglessness of human life, you hear what they are saying. From now on, when a children's show ends with a chin throwing mayonnaise at pigeons after 11 minutes of failed metaphysics, you understand that this is not a failure of writing, it is the writing, it is the entire point. The next idea Camus needs you to understand, after the divorce, is the one he is most afraid of. He calls it, when he is being technical, the contingency of existence. When he is not being technical, he simply describes it. He describes it as the moment in your life when, for whatever reason, you stop and you notice that you didn't have to be here. You didn't have to be born. The specific arrangement of atoms that you call yourself was not on any level necessary. Two people met. They could very easily not have met. They had a child. The child could very easily not have been you. You exist, in other words, by accident, and the universe that produced you would have continued exactly the same had you never existed. Camus, in the essay, describes this moment as a kind of nausea. It is the same nausea that Sartre would build an entire novel around 5 years later. It is the nausea of contingency. The realization that you, this particular you, the one reading this or hearing this, did not have to be. And, by extension, that you do not have to keep being. The world will not insist. The world will not even notice. There is, on Cartoon Network, an episode that is entirely about this nausea. It aired on August 14th, 2014, in the UK first, before its US debut later that month. Season 3, Episode 12, 88th episode of the series. It is called The Void. It opens with Gumball and Darwin watching cheerleaders practice at the Elmore Junior High Stadium. The cheerleaders form a pyramid, collapse, injure themselves, and explode. The brothers, walking back to the school, wonder if the cheerleaders were missing something. A man in a tinfoil hat appears. He is Mr. Small, the school counselor, voiced by Jessica McDonald. He says that there is a conspiracy in Elmore. Things go missing. He tells them to look for what is not there, to look for what does not make sense. He is wearing a tinfoil hat because he believes the hat will prevent his erasure. The boys investigate. They notice in the school hallway that there are lockers numbered 115 and 117, but no locker 116. They notice that the gap between the lockers feels wrong, the way a missing tooth feels wrong. They pry the gap open with their fingers. The wall of reality unzips. The three of them, the two brothers and the counselor, are sucked through the rip in the universe and into a place outside Elmore. The place is not heaven, it is not hell. It is a vast white expanse, lit from no source, with TV static at the edges, in which float, weightlessly, all the things the world has decided were mistakes. There is a Hindenburg-style Zeppelin, on fire. There is a basketball hoop of an outdated design. There is a keytar, the early 80s electronic keyboard guitar. There are jorts. There is the mullet. There is, in one corner of the void, the dwarf planet Pluto, drawn to look like Jupiter because the writers know you don't really remember what Pluto looks like. The void is, the show explains in its quiet way, where the universe puts what it has decided to forget. It is also where the universe puts people. Specifically, the void contains the cheerleader. No, not the cheerleader, the friend. The missing friend, a sauropod named Molly Collins. Molly was a regular character in Season 1. She had a treehouse. She was the kind of character who shows up in the background of the school cafeteria and says, one line per episode. The writers have decided, the show now reveals, that Molly was deemed insufficiently interesting to keep. The world has erased her. Her treehouse has been deleted. Her locker has been deleted. The yearbook still shows her, but no one except for Mr. Small in his tinfoil hat can remember that she was ever there. She is, by the time the boys find her, frozen in midair in the void, like a video on pause. They unfreeze her by touching her shoulder. They rescue her. They climb back through the rip. The rip closes behind them. As it closes, it takes their tinfoil hats with it. The tinfoil hats had been the things that allowed them to remember the void. Without the hats, they forget. They walk back into Elmore not knowing what has just happened. Molly is back. The world is intact. The boys do not know that they have just rescued a friend from oblivion. The episode ends. This is, by any reasonable description of the absurd, the most direct dramatization of Camus' contingency that has ever been made for children. The world is a system that maintains itself by erasing what it has decided does not matter. The criteria for erasure are not stated. A character is sent to the void for being a flat character. An object is sent to the void for being an outdated fashion choice. A planet, Pluto, is sent to the void because in 2006, the International Astronomical Union changed the definition of what counts as a planet, and the universe of Elmore, watching this happen on the news, decided to comply. The void is not a moral system. It is not punishing the wicked. It is not rewarding the good. It is, in the strict Camusian sense, indifferent. It removes what it removes. The removed do not get to argue. The removed are not even remembered. What you, the viewer, are watching when you watch this episode is a children's program articulating the idea that being forgotten is the same as being deleted, and that being deleted is, for most of the universe, a routine maintenance procedure. Molly is not killed. Molly has not been wronged. Molly has been edited out, the way a draft of a novel might lose a minor character because the novelist decided the chapter ran long. The universe of Elmore is, the show is telling you, an actively edited universe. There is a hand somewhere doing the editing. The hand is not malicious. The hand is just doing its job. The episode is asking you very gently to consider that your own universe might also be edited. That the version of you that is here, reading this, might be the version that survived the cut. That somewhere in some void of the actual world, there might be the version of you that was not interesting enough, that was deemed a mistake, that was quietly removed before you ever knew what version you were. Camus uses for this same idea a less elegant metaphor. He describes the absurd as the feeling that comes over a man who, walking down the street, sees in a phone booth the silhouette of another man making a phone call. Camus writes that you can see the man, you can see him gesturing, but because the booth is glass and his voice does not carry, you cannot hear what he is saying. He is performing a mime of speech. He is, from your side of the glass, ridiculous. Camus says, this is what we look like to ourselves the moment we see ourselves the way the universe sees us. We are the man in the phone booth. We are gesturing meaningfully into the air, and the universe is on the other side of the glass, watching without listening, watching without hearing, watching without caring whether the call connects. The void, in the amazing world of Gumball, is the universe's phone booth. The forgotten characters inside it are still gesturing. There is no sound. There is, in this same season, a follow-up episode that takes the void's logic and turns it into something even crueler. It airs on March 5th, 2015. Season 3, Episode 36, 112th episode overall. It is called The Nobody. The premise of the episode begins as a mistake. Things are going missing in the Watterson household. Money from Nicole's purse, a toothbrush, Anais' stuffed donkey. Nicole, Richard, and Anais accuse Gumball and Darwin of stealing. The boys are confined to their room. They begin investigating the actual culprit. They discover, slowly, that someone has been living in secret in the Watterson basement. The secret basement is itself a discovery. The Wattersons have been living in this house for years. The basement was always there. It is only now, when something is wrong, that the family notices. The intruder is, when the boys finally corner him, a tall, thin, blue figure with a single eye, a static textured face, and the suggestion of a body that has been put together wrong. He cannot remember anything. He cannot say his own name. He says he is simply a nobody. The boys, having no other framework for him, decide to give him one. They suggest he could be a side character, he could be a sidekick. Maybe he could be a romantic interest. Maybe, says Darwin, he could be a bad guy. Slowly, as he listens, the nobody begins to remember. What he remembers is a flashback. The flashback is to the events of the episode The Void, which had aired 6 months earlier. We see the same scene the audience already saw, but from a different angle. While Gumball, Darwin, and Mr. Small are pulling Molly out of the rift, another character in the background is calling out for help. Another character is also frozen in the void. Another character has been deemed a mistake. He is a tall, thin, single-eyed figure that the audience may or may not remember from a brief background appearance in Season 1. An unnamed kid at the school. He waves, he shouts. The boys do not see him. The boys do not hear him. The boys leave with Molly. The rift closes. The single-eyed nobody, in his desperation, grabs onto the back of Mr. Small's hippie van, which is being towed out of the void by sheer luck. He is dragged through the closing rift. The closing rift physically deforms him. He emerges into the world, disfigured, his face broken into permanent television static, his body stretched at angles, his memory erased. He has, by accident, escaped the void. He has, by accident, become the only mistake the world has ever failed to fully delete. His name, when he eventually remembers it, is Rob. What Rob says next, in this episode, is the most quietly devastating monologue in the entire history of the show. He has just remembered that the boys, his current rescuers, were the ones who, 6 months earlier, did not see him. He says, "You left me disfigured. You left me a nobody. But now," he says, "you have given me a part to play in the world." He says, "I will be your worst nightmare. I will destroy everything you care about. I will take away everyone you love. I will be your nemesis." He delivers this speech with full operatic menace. Gumball and Darwin, having no emotional reaction whatsoever, look at him for a moment. Gumball says, "Huh, cool, glad we could help." They walk away. The episode ends with Rob looking after them, disappointed. He has just been given his identity. The two characters who gave it to him are not impressed. What this episode is doing, beneath the joke, is more philosophically ambitious than almost any animated children's program of the 2010s ever attempted. Rob is, in the strict Camusian sense, a man who has woken up. He has been, in the language of the essay, made conscious of his contingency. He has seen the rift in the universe. He has been, briefly, on the other side of the glass. He has come back, and he is the only person in the room who knows what is on the other side. Everyone else in Elmore is operating as if the world is solid. He alone knows that the world has a void in it, that the void deletes what it does not want, and that he, by every right, should not exist anymore. He is a Camusian stranger in the most literal sense. He is the one who has stopped pretending the world has invited him in. He knows it has not. What he does with this knowledge, however, is the part that Camus would have flinched at. Rob does not respond to his awakening with revolt. He responds with revenge. He decides that since he has been wronged by the world, he will become the world's antagonist. He picks up the role of bad guy because the boys have offered it to him, and because he needs a part. He could have in principle picked up any role. He could have been a hermit. He could have been a teacher. He could have been a saint. He picks villain because villainy is for him the cleanest narrative shape. It is, in other words, the leap of faith. Rob, having seen the absurd, refuses to live with the absurd. He fills the silence with vengeance. He decides that there is meaning, and that meaning is opposing Gumball, and he commits the rest of his existence to it. Camus, watching this, would have called Rob a man who escaped one prison and immediately built another. The void could not hold him. He has built in its place a smaller void, named Gumball, that he can carry around with him. This is, in Camusian terms, the failure mode. This is the thing Camus is warning against in pages 30 through 80 of the essay. When the absurd announces itself, you will be tempted to fill it. You will be tempted to take the silence and put a god into it, or a cause, or a hatred, or a project, or a love that is supposed to redeem your existence. Camus does not say that doing this is wicked. He says that doing this is escape. He says that the only honest response, the only response that does not betray what you have just seen, is to keep the silence open, to not fill it, to live every day with the awareness that no thing in your life is required to be there, including yourself, including your loves, including your villain. Rob, choosing his villain role, has filled the silence with Gumball-shaped meaning. He is no longer awake. He has gone back to sleep in a different bed with worse dreams. Note now, while the show is still in season 3, what the writers are doing structurally. They have, in the span of about 10 episodes, built into their universe a cosmology that maps directly onto Camus. The void is the contingency. The act of being sent to the void is the moment of the absurd announcing itself. Rob is the man who has woken up. The two main characters, Gumball and Darwin, are the children who have not yet woken up but have been pushed repeatedly against the edges of the universe. The town, Elmore, is the world. The world is openly observably wrong. The family, the Wattersons, are an animal that has accepted the wrongness and is somehow, against all odds, still functioning as a family. The premise is set. The premise will not change again. From this point forward, the show will be about how each character chooses to respond to a world that has announced itself, by accident, as absurd. There is a small, almost hidden detail in the Void's design that is worth pausing on. The background of the Void is television static, the same static that, when it appears on Rob's face, marks him as someone who has been there. Rob's body has embedded in its skin the signal of cancellation. The black and white snow that used to fill American TV screens between channels, and after midnight, the noise that means no one is broadcasting, no one is there. The animators did not name this in dialogue. They did not need to. Anyone old enough to remember pre-cable television knows what static means. It means absence. It means programming that is ended. It means a TV that has been left on after the world has gone to bed. Rob is, on a literal animation level, made out of the visual evidence that nothing is on the air anymore. He carries the void with him. Wherever he walks, the absence walks with him. You, watching this, in 2015, sitting on a couch eating cereal, were being shown a character whose body was a literalization of Camus' central image. The divorce had been baked into the design. The animators had drawn it on, and the show was streaming this image week after week to children who had not yet read Camus, who would not read Camus for years, who might never read Camus, but who would by the time they were adults, have absorbed his entire argument by osmosis, through the design of a cyclops with a static-filled face who used to be a nobody and was now, very quietly, the most philosophically dangerous character on basic cable. There is a sentence in The Stranger that when you read it the first time sounds like a small observation. It is the sentence in which Meursault, the narrator, describes his apartment in Algiers. He says that his apartment is convenient for one person, but inconvenient for two. He says that the dining room is so small that he eats off the kitchen table. He says that the bedroom is fine. He says that the courtyard is dirty. There is no metaphor in any of this. He is just describing a room. What you only realize on a second reading is that this is the entire moral structure of the book. Meursault sees what is in front of him. He does not embellish. He does not invent significance. The room is the room. The mother is dead. The Arab on the beach is, briefly, alive. The sun is too hot. He is going to be guillotined. Each fact is given exactly the weight it has, no more. The novel is, on a sentence level, a refusal to bring more meaning to the world than the world has already brought to itself. That is what makes Meursault a stranger. Not that he is exotic or violent or remote, that he sees the world without adding to it. This is when you watch enough of the amazing world of Gumball, also how the show looks at itself. The show looks at itself like Meursault looks at a room. There is no embellishment of the absurdity. There is no winking in the early seasons at the strangeness of the premise. The strangeness is just there, presented as fact, and the show moves on. The town of Elmore is shown to be set in California, in the Vallejo area, because in the episode The Question, when the planets sing, the camera pulls back from Earth and you can see the Bay Area. The town is, in other words, real. The town is, in other ways, openly impossible. And the show describes the town the way Meursault describes his apartment, with a flat, declarative gaze that refuses to be impressed. You can see this most clearly in the show's animation style itself. The amazing world of Gumball is, technically, a mixed media production. The characters are, depending on the character, drawn in different visual languages. Gumball, Darwin, Nicole, and Aeneas are 2D animated the way you would expect a Cartoon Network character to be drawn, with flat colors and visible outlines. Richard, the father, is also 2D animated, but in a slightly different style, a little softer, a little more mid-20th century, as if he came from an older show. Some of the supporting characters are openly 3D rendered. Tina the dinosaur is a CGI Tyrannosaurus dropped into a 2D town. Mr. Robinson next door is a 2D cartoon that walks around in a CGI textured house. Ocho, the video game character, is animated as 8-bit pixel art the way a Pac-Man would have been drawn in 1980. Bobert the robot is rendered in clean industrial CGI. Hector the giant is hand-drawn in a thicker, more gestural style. Carmen the cactus is a stop-motion physical object, photographed and inserted into the animation. The backgrounds, in many episodes, are not animated at all. They are photographs. real photographs of real places in West London where the show was produced. The world the characters walk through is, on a literal level, the production designer's holiday photos. What this means when you sit and look at any frame of any episode is that the visual surface of the show is itself the absurd. The characters do not match, they do not match each other, they do not match their world. They are all, at every moment, on the wrong side of the glass from each other. A 2D cat is sitting on a CGI couch in a photographed living room talking to a stop-motion plant about a problem he is having with an 8-bit video game character. None of these things should be in the same frame. None of them should be able to interact. None of them, by any rule of visual consistency, belongs. And yet they do. They sit in the same room, they share dinner, they love each other. They argue, they forget what is wrong with their world, because inside the world, the wrongness is just normal. This is, on a structural level, the absurd. Camus' whole point is that we are 2D characters living in a 3D universe, and we cannot see the seams. The amazing world of Gumball makes the seams visible. The show is constructed in such a way that if you look closely, you can see the divorce. You can see that the boy and the table are made of different substances. You can see that the cactus has been photographed, but the cat has been drawn. You can see that nothing in the universe of this family was, on a production level, designed to be in the same universe. They were assembled, they were thrown together, they have been told by the show to live as if the assembly were a family. They have agreed to do this. The agreement is what the show is about. There is, in the design history of Gumball, a small fact that is worth pausing on. Ben Beaucolet, the show's creator, was hired in 2007 by Cartoon Network Studios Europe to help other animators pitch their ideas to the network. He was, in other words, a junior employee whose job was to help his colleagues sell their dreams. At some point, the studio decided that Beaucolet should also pitch. He had not been planning to, he did not have an original world ready. He had, however, been doing freelance work for years, designing characters for advertising commercials. Some of those character designs had been rejected by the brands they were meant to sell. Toothpaste characters, cereal mascots, insurance company spokespeople. Beaucolet had a folder full of failed, abandoned, rejected commercial mascots, drawn in different styles by different briefs for different clients, none of whom had ever wanted them. He had nowhere to put them. He decided for his pitch to put them all in the same school. The school would be called Elmore Junior High. The cat would be a rejected toothpaste mascot. The goldfish, the rabbit, the cactus, the stop-motion plant, the CGI dinosaur, all of them would be put together not because they belonged together, but because no one else had wanted them, and because Ben Beaucolet had, for his own reasons, kept them. This is, on a level that probably cannot be improved upon, the most Camusian origin story in the history of animation. The show is, by its own confession, a school for rejected mascots. The characters are there because nothing else worked out for them. The world they share has been improvised out of the discard pile of capitalism. The visual incoherence of the show is not a stylistic choice. It is the truth of what the show is. The characters are mistakes. They live together because no one has come to take them away. And they have decided, with the quiet stubbornness that Camus would have recognized, to be a family anyway. The void in Season 3, Episode 12 is, in a strange way, just where the studio could have sent any of them, on any given day, if the show had not been picked up. Every character on the show is, in production terms, one rewrite away from oblivion. The void is not a metaphor for what could happen to a fictional character. It is a description of what almost did happen to all of them. You hear, sometimes, animators talk about how television production goes. There is a folder somewhere. The folder is full of designs that did not get used. The folder is full of voices that auditioned and didn't get hired. The folder is full of plot lines that were broken in the writer's room and shelved. The folder is the void. Every show that gets made is sitting on top of a folder of every show that didn't. Every character that survives is sitting on top of a stack of characters that didn't survive. The void of mistakes that the writers showed you in Season 3 is on a level the show never quite admits. The void that it itself is haunted by. The writers know what it is to make something that gets cut. The writers know what it is to write a Molly. The episode is autobiography. The episode is what the writers are afraid will happen to them. The episode airs on Cartoon Network. The episode, 8 years later, is itself almost archived to the void when the show is canceled in 2019. The episode is then, in 2025, retrieved. The void, briefly, gives back what it took. What Camus would say to this, were he able to watch it, is that the writers have stumbled onto a true thing. Camus argued in The Myth of Sisyphus, and again at greater length in The Rebel 9 years later, that art is, in a serious sense, the only honest response to the absurd. not because art creates meaning. Camus does not believe that. Camus believes the universe is silent and will remain silent, and that no painting, no novel, no animated cartoon will alter the silence. What art does for Camus is make a small, local, defiant addition to the world that is not required to be there. The painter paints, the novelist writes, the animator draws. None of them are needed, none of their work is required by physics. None of it will, in the long run, last. The sun, in the question, will eventually explode. The earth will be incinerated. The cartoon will not survive that. The book will not survive that. Nothing the writer makes will survive that. And yet the writer keeps making it. This, for Camus, is the cleanest possible analogy for Sisyphus pushing the rock. The artist knows the rock will roll back. The artist pushes anyway. The artist, in the moment of pushing, is happy. Boglet did not, as far as can be reconstructed from interviews, set out to make a Camusian show. He set out to make a kids' show. He had a folder of failed mascots and a job at a studio and a brief from his employer. He needed the show to be funny, to be cheap, to be exportable to Cartoon Network's international markets. None of this is a Camusian project on the face of it. What happened, however, is that the show's structural premise, a school for rejected things, naturally produced episodes in which the question of what makes a thing worth keeping became unavoidable. Once you have set up a universe in which all the characters are rejects, the universe is going to start asking, in episode after episode, why these particular rejects matter. The Void episode is the first time the show asks this question with complete seriousness. It is not the last. Look, for example, at the way the show treats Richard Watterson, the father. Richard is, on every conventional sitcom dad metric, a failure. He is unemployed for most of the show's run. He is openly performatively stupid. He eats compulsively. He cannot be entrusted with the household budget. He cannot, in many episodes, be entrusted with his own children. His wife, Nicole, is shown to do all of the actual work of keeping the family alive, holding down a job at the Rainbow Factory, paying the bills, managing the schedule, while Richard sits at home in his t-shirt and watches television. By the standards of the show's parent company, by the standards of every other animated father in the same era, Richard should be a punching bag. He should be the show's joke. Family Guy did this with Peter Griffin. The Simpsons did this with Homer. American Dad did this with Stan Smith. The dumb cartoon father was, by the time Beaucolet wrote his first episode, an exhausted television tradition. Richard is not the joke. Richard is, when you watch carefully, the show's most quietly philosophical character. He is happy. He is consistently, undefendedly, almost embarrassingly happy. His happiness does not come from achievement, since he has not achieved anything. It does not come from family pride, since his children regularly correct him. It does not come from religion or money or status or the satisfaction of work. It comes from somewhere else. Richard, watching the world fall apart on his television screen, eats a sandwich. Richard, told by his wife that the family is bankrupt, suggests they make pancakes. Richard, being chased by a creature from another dimension, asks if the creature would like a hug. Richard's responses to the absurd are not the responses of someone who has not noticed the absurd. They are the responses of someone who has fully understood the absurd, decided that nothing he can do will fix it, and decided to be hungry instead. Richard is, in his quiet, pink bunny rabbit way, an absurd hero. He is, almost in spite of the writers, a Camusian saint. In the final chapter of The Myth of Sisyphus, Camus describes a category of person he calls the absurd man. The absurd man, Camus says, is not a hero in the conventional sense. He is not a martyr. He is not a sage. The absurd man is a person who, having understood that life is meaningless, refuses to be unhappy about it. The absurd man, Camus says, takes his pleasures where he finds them. The absurd man does his work because there is work to do, but he does not pretend the work has cosmic significance. The absurd man eats well, sleeps well, loves who he loves, and does not pretend that any of these things are exempt from the rock. He is just, in Camus' phrase, present to his life. Camus uses 3 examples in this chapter. He uses Don Juan the seducer who never settles down, because Don Juan refuses the lie that anyone love is the meaning of his life. He uses the actor who plays 1,000 different parts, because the actor refuses the lie that any one role is who he really is. And he uses the conqueror who lives entirely in the present action, because the conqueror refuses the lie that anything will, in the end, last. Richard Watterson, sitting on his couch in a town in California that was assembled out of rejected commercial mascots, is the 4th example Camus did not get to use. Richard never settles into the role of an unhappy father. Richard never accepts the script that says the unemployed dad is a tragedy. Richard never acts as if his stupidity is something to be ashamed of. Richard is just every episode hungry and happy and surprised by what is happening and ready to be hugged. He is, by accident, doing what Camus said the absurd man should do. He is taking his pleasures where he finds them. He is refusing to suffer about a life that does not, in his estimation, require suffering. He is the proof of concept on basic cable of the exact philosophical position Camus was trying to articulate in occupied Paris in 1942. The position was that you can know the world is meaningless and still eat a sandwich and still be glad about it. The position is, when you put it on a t-shirt, almost embarrassing. The position is, when you put it on Cartoon Network, for 8 years, the most quietly successful piece of philosophical evangelism that an animated show has ever undertaken. Richard is Sisyphus eating cake. Richard is the man who does not, when given a chance to feel sorry for himself, take the chance. Richard is happy. Richard is, by a definition, Camus did not live to see broadcast free. On September 5th, 2016, Cartoon Network in the United States aired the 40th and final episode of Season 4 of The Amazing World of Gumball. It is the 156th episode overall. The episode is titled The Disaster. It is by any reasonable measure the most ambitious thing the show ever did. It is also the moment when Camus' idea of philosophical suicide, the leap of faith, gets dramatized inside a children's program with such precision that you almost wonder if the writers had a copy of The Myth of Sisyphus open in the room. The episode opens, as many late-season Gumball episodes do, with the Watterson family in their station wagon, driving to the Elmore Mall. Nicole, behind the wheel, notices her children are bored, so she starts singing a rhyming song to keep them entertained. Richard joins in, Anais joins in. Gumball, at the end of the family verse, refuses to participate properly. He sings, instead of the obvious next line, that he is going to buy some donkey drool. The other children laugh. The song continues. The car pulls into the parking lot. The camera, leaving the Wattersons, drifts across the parking lot to a van. There is something happening in the van. Rob, the Cyclops with the static face, is in the van. He is purchasing something. The thing he is purchasing is a remote control. The man selling it to him, an unseen figure with a deep voice, warns him that the remote is a universal remote, with a power only a fool would not fear, and asks him what he intends to use it for. Rob, with full villain authority, says he will use it for TVs, DVD players, and vengeance. The man inside the van tells him that the remote cannot be used for evil. There is a brief struggle. Rob takes the remote. The man inside the van demands payment. Rob presses one of the buttons. The man inside the van is deleted. The van is also deleted. Rob is alone in the parking lot, holding a remote, looking at where the universe used to have a man and a van. What happens in the next minute of screen time is, on a structural level, the most theologically charged sequence in the entire run of the show. Rob begins, slowly, to experiment with the remote. He hits the eject button on a nearby ATM. The ATM ejects money. He hits the play button on a sprinkler. The sprinkler turns on, and it begins to rain on the parking lot in a sunny afternoon, only on the area Rob is pointing the remote at. He hits a button that switches the sun and the moon. Day becomes night. Night becomes day. Day again. Each switch of the button alters the actual position of celestial bodies in the actual sky over Elmore. Rob, as this is happening, is grinning. He has been a nobody for 2.5 seasons. He has been a flat, forgettable background character. He has been, by his own bitter description, disfigured and meaningless. He is, suddenly, holding a small piece of plastic that allows him to operate the universe. The remote does what God's remote would do. Rob, at this moment in the episode, has become God of his own world. He does not yet know what that means. He hits rewind, the remote does what rewind does. The episode begins running backward. We see the title card again, in reverse. We see the Cartoon Network station identification bumper that played before the episode, in reverse. We see, even, a flashback to the events of the episode, The Nobody, where Rob first remembered what had happened to him in the void. Rob, hitting rewind hard enough to cross episode boundaries, has accidentally rewound the show itself. He realizes, in this moment, what he is holding. He is holding a device that operates the show he is in. He is, in this moment, the first character in The Amazing World of Gumball to fully understand that The Amazing World of Gumball is a show. The fourth wall does not break for him. The fourth wall opens. He walks through it. What he sees on the other side is the universe that has been making him miserable for his entire conscious life. He sees that he is a character. He sees that there are credits. He sees that the world he has been suffering inside is not in any deep sense real. It is a production, it has writers, it has animators, it has a network. It has somewhere A man with a voice in a van who sells remotes to characters that the writers have decided are minor. Rob, looking at the architecture of his world, has the response that, philosophically, every reader of the myth of Sisyphus is invited to have. He has the moment of awakening. He sees the absurd. He sees with full clarity that nothing in his life has been required to be the way it has been. The void, his disfigurement, his villainy, his loneliness, his very name, all of it has been arbitrary. Someone has been writing it. Someone could have written it differently. The universe has been, all along, a story that did not have to go this way. This is exactly the moment Camus wrote about. The moment the scenery falls down. The moment the chair turns out to be paper. Camus' prediction at this moment is that the awakened character will be tempted to fill the silence, to take the new clarity and use it to construct a project. To, in his term, leap. Rob does not disappoint Camus. Rob, looking at the universe of his suffering, decides that he will use the remote to author his own ending. He will, with the device that operates reality, delete Gumball Watterson from the show. He will do it methodically. He will isolate Gumball from his family. He will use the remote to remove Gumball's parents from each other by turning off what the remote labels parental filter, which causes Nicole and Richard to lose their inhibitions and immediately begin a divorce. He will use the remote to send Darwin running away by manipulating subtitles. He will use it to delete characters one by one. He will use the eject button on Banana Joe, who was shot out of the parking lot like a punted football. He will turn Anais and the rest of the children into babies by hitting rewind. Slowly, methodically. He will dismantle the world that contains Gumball, until Gumball is alone, until everyone Gumball loves has been removed, until the protagonist of the show is sitting in a wreckage of plot points with no people left in the cast to talk to. This is, when you describe it in those terms, the project of every villain. The villain wants to break the protagonist's world. What is unusual in this episode is that the villain understands what world he is breaking. Rob is not breaking Elmore. Rob is breaking the show. He is acting on the meta level. He has gone above the floor of the universe and is operating from the ceiling. He is, for the first half hour of his enlightenment, a true philosopher. He has seen the absurd. He has, however, used what he saw to organize a hatred. The hatred is structurally identical to what Camus described as religious longing in his criticism of Kierkegaard. Rob has met the silence and decided that he can defeat it by giving it a target. The target is Gumball. The silence will be filled with Gumball-shaped suffering. The world will, finally, mean something to him. The meaning will be revenge. Camus, watching this episode, would have written, again, the chapter of the myth of Sisyphus that he called philosophical suicide. He would have said, very gently, that Rob has not woken up. Rob has fallen back asleep with his eyes open. The remote has not given Rob freedom. The remote has given Rob a project. The project will, like every project a man takes up to fill the silence, eventually fail him. The remote will run out of battery. The world will reset. The hatred will not, in the end, be the meaning Rob thought it was. He will be, when the episode ends, exactly as alone as he was at the start. Except now, he will be alone with the additional knowledge that the universe is not in any way on his side. The episode does not have a clean ending. Rob, in the final beat of the season 4 finale, throws Gumball into the void. He stands at the edge of the rip and watches the protagonist of the show fall screaming into the static. The credits, on Gumball's side of the void, begin to roll. Rob smiles. The screen, for the audience, freezes. A white card appears. The card says, "To be continued." The 4th season of The Amazing World of Gumball ends with its main character falling, as a credit sequence plays inside the universe, into the place where forgotten things are kept. Cartoon Network, that night, did not air a follow-up episode. The audience went to bed. The audience would not get the resolution to that cliffhanger for another 10 months. The 5th season would open with the second half of the disaster, called The Rerun, on a date in 2017. For 10 months, Gumball was in the void. For 10 months, the meta-villain was god of the show. For 10 months, philosophical suicide was, technically, winning. What this episode reveals, taken together with the nobody before it, is that The Amazing World of Gumball is doing something with its villain that no other animated show in its peer group was attempting. Rob is, at this point in the show, structurally identical to Camus' account of the existentialist philosopher who escapes the absurd by producing meaning artificially. Rob has the universe's remote control. He could, in principle, use it for anything. He could rewrite the universe to be paradise. He could rewrite himself to be handsome again. He could undo his own banishment to the void. He could make Molly come back. He could give every character in Elmore exactly what they want. The remote, the show, is at pains to demonstrate. Has no moral programming, it does what it is told. The choice of what to do with it is entirely Rob's. And Rob, given the literal universe to author, chooses to author a smaller story in which one specific cat is punished for one specific failure of recognition. He shrinks. The remote could have made him God. It has made him, instead, a particularly motivated stalker. This is, when you put it next to Camus, almost too on the nose. Camus' argument against the leap of faith is precisely that the leap shrinks the leaper. The believer, faced with the silence of the universe, does not want the silence to be a voice. The believer fills the silence with God, or with destiny, or with Gumball Watterson's destruction, and the moment the silence is filled, the believer has lost the universe. The universe, for Camus, is bigger than any project a single person can put inside it. To fill the universe with a project is to refuse the universe. It is to admit that you cannot live in the actual world. It is, in his harsh term, suicide. Not physical suicide. Philosophical suicide, the death of the part of you that was, briefly, willing to look the absurd in the face. Rob, with his remote, has performed this suicide on himself. He has decided that the universe is not bigger than Gumball. He is wrong about this. The universe is much bigger than Gumball, and the moment Rob points the remote at Gumball, the moment he makes the cat the answer, he becomes smaller than he was when he was a nobody in the void. He has authored himself into a corner. You should pause here, if you are still awake, and notice what the show is doing structurally. The Villain's Awakening is the dramatic engine of two of the highest rated episodes the show ever produced. The Villain's Awakening is also the show's quiet warning to its audience about what to do with their own awakenings. The show is every Thursday night telling children that the world is broken. The show is, in the disaster, telling the children what not to do once they have noticed. Do not, the show is saying, try to use the broken world to break someone else. Do not pick up the remote and aim it at a person. Do not let your understanding that the universe is meaningless become a license for cruelty. Do not, in Camus' phrase, take what crushes you and turn it into a god. Rob has done all of this. The show is going to spend the rest of Season 4 and most of Season 5 and several arcs in Season 6, showing you how badly that worked out for him. The show is, in this respect, taking its philosophical responsibilities to its audience more seriously than almost any animated program of the 2010. There is, in the disaster episode, a small visual detail that is worth slowing down to look at. When Rob throws Gumball into the void, the camera, briefly, shows you the inside of the rip from Gumball's perspective. You see on the other side of the portal, the closing rectangle of color. You see also that the rectangle of color is very specifically framed like a television screen. The portal is in the shape of a TV. The credits that scroll on Gumball's side as he falls are written in the font of the show's actual credits. The image is, on a literal level, the show being broadcast inside the universe. Gumball, falling, is watching his own program end. He is watching the credits roll on him. He is, for the duration of the fall, an audience member to his own death. The show, drawing this image, has taken the ancient anxiety that you are being watched by a hidden audience and made it the architecture of its season finale. The cat is in the void. The void has the credits playing. The cat is, briefly, the only person in the universe who can see how the show is structured. He is also about to be deleted. The rerun, when it airs the following year, is structured around Gumball's response to this revelation. He has fallen into the void. Rob has won. Rob, at the end of the previous episode, accidentally hit rewind, which sent both of them back to the start of the parking lot scene. Gumball, in the rerun, knows everything that is about to happen. He has been through it once. He has been through it once, knowing as he lived it, that it was a show. He has, in other words, become the second character in the run of the show to know what Rob knows. He is awake now too. The rerun is, for its first 6 minutes, a study of what a different kind of awakened character looks like. Gumball does not pick up a remote and aim it at his enemy. Gumball does not try to delete Rob. Gumball, instead, uses what he now knows to try to keep his family alive. He shows Darwin where the closed captioning subtitles are about to lie about him. He warns his mother. He warns his father. He absorbs the bullets. He absorbs them not because he believes the universe owes him anything for absorbing them. He absorbs them because his family is the part of the universe he has decided to be present for. Camus, here, would have stopped writing for a moment. He would have looked at the screen. He would have, perhaps, walked to the kitchen, lit a cigarette, walked back. He would have, eventually, sat down and typed out something close to what he wrote in the closing pages of The Rebel in 1951. He would have written that the absurd man, having seen the silence, can do one of two things. He can fill the silence with a project of negation, which is what Rob did. Or he can stand inside the silence and protect what he loves with the time he has, which is what Gumball is now doing. Camus called the second response revolt. Real revolt, in his sense, is not a project. It is a permanent, ongoing refusal to let the absurd take what is in front of you. The mother, the brother, the friend on the bench, the mayonnaise on the counselor. You do not save them by forcing the universe to make sense. You save them by paying attention to them, knowing they cannot be saved forever. Gumball, in the rerun, is paying attention. Gumball has not picked up a remote. Gumball is, by Camus' standard, the first awakened character in the show who has chosen the right kind of awakening. The image you are meant to keep when you finish reading The Myth of Sisyphus is not the image of the rock. It is the image of the walk back down. Camus says this explicitly in the last paragraph of the essay, with a rhetorical move that is one of the cleanest pieces of philosophical writing of the 20th century. He says, "The rock is one thing. We can all picture the rock. The rock is the labor, the futility, the absurd toil. Sisyphus pushing the rock up the mountain is the version of the story everyone knows. What Camus says he is interested in is not the rock. Camus says he is interested in the moment after the rock has rolled back down. The moment when Sisyphus is walking back to the bottom to start again. That moment in the original Greek myth is given exactly zero attention. The myth does not care what Sisyphus thinks during his walk. The myth only cares about the futility of the punishment." Camus says in the essay that he wants to imagine the walk. He wants to imagine what is in Sisyphus's head as he descends. Because that walk, Camus argues, is where Sisyphus becomes or fails to become free. If Sisyphus, on the walk down, is suffering, then the punishment has worked. The gods have won. He is bowed, the rock will, when he reaches it, be heavier the next time. If Sisyphus is, on the walk down, lost in fantasy, dreaming of escape, then he is in a different kind of trap. He is not present to his life. He has fled into hope. Camus' contention is that Sisyphus, if he is to be free, must do neither. Sisyphus must, on the walk down, be conscious of his situation, accept that the rock is going to roll back, refuse to fantasize about a world in which it doesn't, and yet still find the walk to be a thing of small real value. The breeze on the mountain, the crunch of stones under his feet, the moment of solitude before the next round of labor. Sisyphus, walking back to his rock with full awareness that he will spend eternity at this task, can be happy if and only if he has stopped requiring the universe to give him a reason to be alive. He has decided to be alive without one. The decision, Camus says, is the freedom. The decision, repeated each time the rock rolls back, is what makes Sisyphus a hero rather than a victim. We must, the essay closes, imagine Sisyphus happy. This is, almost as a matter of plot mechanics, what Gumball Watterson does in the back half of the rerun. He has, by the end of the Disaster's Rewind, returned to the start of the parking lot scene. He knows what is going to happen. He knows Rob is going to come for his family. He knows the remote is, somewhere, about to be activated. He knows, in the deepest sense, that the world he is in is going to fall apart, and then it is going to be put back together, and then it is going to fall apart again. He is, in other words, Sisyphus. He has reached the top of the mountain. He has watched the rock roll back. He is, again, at the bottom. The episode is the walk. What he chooses to do with the walk is to spend it on his family. He does not, at any point in the episode, address the camera. He does not, at any point, monologue about his new awareness. The show, by this point, is no longer interested in the easy fourth wall break. The fourth wall has already been broken by Rob. The novelty of breaking it is gone. What is left for Gumball is the question of how to live now that he knows. He chooses to spend his second pass through the parking lot moving Darwin out of the path of an ejected banana. He chooses to step in front of the subtitle attack that almost made his brother run away. He chooses, when his mother is about to be hit by the remote's parental filter, to take the hit instead. The remote, on Gumball, partially erases his arms. His arms shrink to the size they would have been when he was a kitten. He keeps using them, he keeps catching his brother, he keeps protecting his family. The arms keep shrinking. By the middle of the episode, he has lost his fingers. He keeps trying. He cannot grip anymore. He keeps trying. There is, in the visual design of this episode, a quiet detail that almost no critic talked about at the time. As Gumball loses his arms, the show's animators draw him with arms that are physically wrong. The arms do not fit the body. The arms become stubs. The stubs become invisible. The show is, on screen, deleting Gumball, piece by piece, the way the Void deletes everything else it has decided is a mistake. Gumball is being voluntarily eaten by the same logic that ate Molly and Rob. He is letting it happen because the alternative is to abandon his family to the same logic. He is, in the strict Camusian sense, walking back down the mountain. He has chosen the rock, he has chosen the descent, he has chosen the work. He is shrinking as he does it. The episode's climax is the part that, when you watch it carefully, is almost unbearable in its philosophical clarity. Gumball, with his fingers gone, with his arms half erased, with the remote in Rob's possession, is alone with Rob in the void. They have both, by some clean piece of remote control physics, ended up inside the static together. Rob is holding the remote. Rob is, by every measure, the winner of the episode. He has the device, he has the protagonist alone. He has the moment. He raises the remote, he prepares to press the power button, which is the button that, the show has established, would erase the universe entirely. Power off would mean the show is over. The remote is, in this moment, a button on the actual television set. The button could turn off the show. The button is in the hand of the character who has wanted, for 2 seasons, to turn off the show. What Gumball does, in this moment, is not what a hero in any conventional kids show would do. He does not, with his last breath, plead for his life. He does not threaten Rob. He does not offer a deal. He says, instead, why are you doing this? He says, you don't have to. He says, you are the one who fell into the void. I will help you out. I am not your problem. The world is your problem. You are not getting out of the void by using me. You are getting out of the void by walking out. Gumball has, in the middle of the void, become the show's first complete pacifist. He is offering Rob the philosophical suicide, the alternative path. He is offering Rob the descent that does not require destruction. He is offering, on a children's network, Camus' exact formula for the absurd hero. You walk back down, you accept the rock, you stop trying to break the universe. Rob does not accept the offer. Rob, in the moment of absolute power, does what Camus said the believer does. He hesitates, he does not press power, he does not press anything for several seconds. He looks at the cat with the broken arms. He looks at the remote, he looks at the void. He looks at the cat again. And then, in a gesture that is, on philosophical examination, the most surprising decision the character makes in the entire run of the show, Rob hits rewind. He undoes everything. He restores Gumball's arms. He restores Banana Joe's location. He restores Nicole and Richard's marriage. He even restores his own previous status, which means he restores his own loneliness, his own static face, his own unhealed grievance against Gumball. He chooses, with the universe's remote in his hand, to put the universe back the way it was. He undoes his own victory. He undoes his own awakening. He goes back to being the villain, with no remote, no power, no clarity. He destroys the remote on the way out. The universe is on the surface reset. Why he does this is the question the show, very deliberately, never answers. The episode does not give Rob a redemption monologue. The episode does not show him weeping. The episode does not have him discover a new philosophy. The episode shows him, simply, hitting the rewind button and then breaking the remote, and then walking out of the parking lot. Whatever happened in his head between the void and the parking lot, the show keeps to itself. What you, the viewer, are left with is the fact that the philosophical suicide, the man who had successfully filled the universe with hatred, looked at the cat with the dissolving arms and could not, in the end, push the button. He had built his whole project around hating Gumball. The cat, by simply offering him the descent, the offer of a real walk down the mountain, broke the project. Rob still hates Gumball. Rob still wants vengeance. Rob is still, by his own internal logic, Gumball's nemesis. But Rob in this moment did not press power. The reasons he did not press power are not articulated. The reasons are not the point. The point is that revolt, in Camus' sense, can be communicated. One person, walking down a mountain at peace, can derail another person who's been trying to dynamite the mountain. The cat with the broken arms, in the void, performed the absurd hero's work, which was to refuse to escalate, and Rob, against every plot instinct that had been built into him since season 3, went home. This is, when you take the long view, the most quietly Christian and the most quietly Camusian moment the show ever produced, simultaneously. It is the moment that if Camus had been able to read it as a treatment, he would have rewritten the chapter on revolt, to use it as the example. Rob is not converted. Rob's project is not refuted. The world is not made meaningful by what just happened. The world is, after the rewind, exactly as silent as it was before. What has changed is that one character refused to use the universe's silence as cover for cruelty. The cat with the dissolving arms, by walking back down the mountain on screen, modeled the descent. The villain saw it. The villain, for one button press, declined to escalate. The world is, on the level of plot, identical to where it was before the disaster began. The world is, on the level of philosophy, a different place. One button has been not pressed. The not pressing is what Camus meant by revolt. You can, if you stay with this idea, see Camus' full position laid out in a child's cartoon over the span of 2 30-minute episodes. The position is this: the universe will not give you meaning. The universe will not give you a reason. The universe will, if anything, take what you have. What is left, when the universe has been honest with you about its silence, is the freedom to refuse. You can refuse to despair. You can refuse to escape. You can refuse, especially, to take what crushes you and use it to crush someone smaller. The universe gave Rob a remote. The remote could have crushed Gumball. Rob, having seen Gumball walk down the mountain in front of him, hit rewind instead. The remote, in his hand, was the void. The not pressing, by Camus' definition, was the rebellion. This is, on a level you almost cannot believe is happening on Cartoon Network, the entire philosophical project of The Rebel, which Camus published in 1951. The Rebel is the longer, more political book that Camus wrote 9 years after Sisyphus. The Rebel is the book in which Camus tries to extend the personal absurd hero into a social philosophy. The Rebel argues, in essence, that the awakened person has an obligation to other awakened people, which is to refuse to participate in their crushing. The awakened person, having seen the silence, must not become a maker of silence for others. The awakened person must, in his phrase, set limits. There are things one does not do, even when one knows that nothing is required. There are buttons one does not press, even when the universe will not punish the pressing. The awakened person is not a god. The awakened person is, in fact, the only kind of person who knows the cost of pretending to be a god. The Rebel is Camus saying, very seriously, that having seen the absurd does not give you license. It gives you, instead, a responsibility you did not have before. You are now the only one in the room who knows what the room is. You must, on that knowledge, decline to weaponize the room. The rerun is, for an 11-minute children's program, the most accurate dramatization of this argument that exists anywhere in the medium. Rob has the remote. Rob is alone with the cat. Rob hits rewind. The Rebel has, in 2017, been illustrated by a goldfish with shoes and a cat with dissolving arms. In West London, on a budget the philosophy department of the Sorbonne would not have spent on lunch. What this means, in the context of the larger argument, is that the show has by season 5 quietly produced, in dramatic form, all 3 movements of the Camusian arc. The divorce in season 3, when the question of meaning was asked of every adult in town, and every adult failed to answer it. The awakening in late season 3, when Rob, returning from the void, became the first character to see the architecture of the world. The leap of faith, philosophical suicide in the disaster, when Rob filled his awakening with vengeance and tried to delete the protagonist. And the rebellion in the rerun, when the protagonist, dissolving, chose to walk back down the mountain instead of climbing it again, and the antagonist, in the moment of victory, declined to pull the trigger. You have watched, in roughly 44 minutes of broadcast time, the entire structure of mid-20th century French absurdist philosophy reenacted in a school for rejected commercial mascots. You have watched it without ever being told that this is what you are watching. You have watched it on Thursday evenings in 2017, on a network owned by AT&T. In between commercials for breakfast cereal, the show has not, in this entire stretch, named Camus once. The show is too polite to. The show, like Camus, believes that the only honest way to communicate the absurd is to dramatize it without commentary. The commentary the show is saying would break the spell. Show me Sisyphus. Show me the walk down. Don't tell me what to think about it. Let me decide whether he is happy. By the time you have made it to the end of season 5, you have, whether you noticed or not, been let in on the secret. You know by now that the universe of Elmore is unstable. You know by now that the characters can be deleted. You know by now that the deletion is permanent unless the void is stopped. You know that the void is somewhere off screen, still there. You know that Rob, despite his rewind, is not done. You know that the show itself, despite the reset, has been changed by what happened. The world cannot be unbroken. The fourth wall has been pierced and patched. The patch is visible if you know where to look. The show, from this point on, will be visibly aware of its own construction. The show will, from this point on, be a show that knows it is a show. and that knowledge will by season 6 become impossible to put back in the bottle. The void will start to overflow, the mountain will start to sink, and the gods off camera will, on June 24th, 2019, finally announce that the show is being canceled. There is, before the cancellation, one more episode that needs to be sat with. It aired on September 29th, 2016, the same month as a disaster. Season 5, Episode 5. The episode is called The Choices. It is, by the consensus of the show's critics, one of the highest rated half hours of the entire run. It does not feature the void. It does not break the fourth wall. It is, on its surface, a domestic episode about a tired mother who has had a hard day at work and is now trying to cook dinner for her chaotic family. It is on every level beneath the surface the most sustained meditation on the absurd freedom of choice that the show ever produced. The episode begins, as the show often does, with chaos. Nicole Watterson is in the kitchen. The children are at the table banging their fists, demanding food. Richard, helpfully, is also banging his fist. Pancakes are falling from the ceiling. The cooking has gone wrong in some unspecified way. Nicole, in a voiceover that opens the episode, says that it was a day like any other, by which she means just as terrible as the rest. She wanted, she says, for them to behave like a normal, civilized family at mealtimes. She might as well, she says, have wished for it to rain pancakes. The pancakes continue to rain. The episode freezes the family on a frame and lets Nicole's narration take over. The narration is going to be the 38-year-old woman briefly examining her life. Nicole begins, in flashback, with a Tuesday afternoon when she was 12 years old. She was in middle school on her way to a karate tournament that she was supposed to win. Her parents, Mary and Daniel Senecourt, are perfectionist overachievers who have built her entire childhood around the expectation that she will excel at everything she does. Her report card shows straight A's with one F. The F, when the camera lingers on the report card, is not in any academic subject. It is in the column marked gender. Nicole is, by her parents' standards, failing at being a girl. The episode does not pause to comment on this. The detail is just there. Nicole has been raised inside a system that grades her femininity. She has gotten an F in it. She is on her way to win a karate tournament so that her parents will look at her with something other than disappointment. On the way, she meets a boy. The boy is Richard. He is enormously, almost violently kind. He tells her she does not have to win the tournament for him to like her. He tells her that lots of people like her. She does not, anywhere in her life up to this point, remember anyone telling her that she did not have to perform in order to be loved. She is 12. The world has, for the first time, gone quiet around her in a way that is not threatening. She does not, in this moment, decide anything. She is just briefly present. The flashback continues. Nicole, having met Richard, begins to imagine alternative lives. The episode renders these as cinematic visions, each one branching off from the karate tournament. In the first vision, she wins the tournament. Her parents are proud. She graduates. She becomes wealthy. She becomes, in time, a politician. She becomes, in time, the president. She becomes, in time, a futuristic dictator with a sculpture of a North Korean hotel behind her, sitting on a throne in a post-apocalyptic landscape, eventually overthrown by revolutionaries. The vision ends with her, frozen in some collapsing palace, having achieved every form of success her parents could have wanted, and being torn apart by history. The episode plays this for laughs. The episode is also, on the level of philosophy, completely serious. Nicole's life, lived perfectly according to her parents' expectations, ends in tyranny. The straight A path is, in the episode's quiet observation, also a path. It is also a road that gets walked. It also produces a person at the end of it, and the person is not necessarily someone you would want to be. In the second vision, she marries a different boy named Bob, a banana who would have been a wealthy and successful banana, a corporate banana, a sushi-eating banana, a banana who buys her a large house in a gated community. The Nicole in this vision is rich. The Nicole in this vision is also, the episode briefly shows, alone. The husband sushi eats but does not look up. The house has empty rooms. The visualizer of this version of her life is technically a perfect outcome by most magazine metrics. The visualizer is also, when the camera pans across the dinner table, a woman eating across from a man who does not see her. This is the second of her possible lives. It also does not work. In the third vision, she marries another boy named Harold, a good and decent man who could have given her a stable middle-class life. This vision is shorter. The vision shows her making sushi for hours for him. The Harold in the vision does not appreciate the sushi. The sushi has gone cold. The vision is the boring vision. It is the vision in which nothing is wrong exactly, and nothing is right exactly, and the woman in the kitchen has spent 6 hours on something that her husband will eat in 15 minutes without commenting. This is the safe path. The safe path is also a path. It is also a long Tuesday afternoon that turns into the rest of a life. It also, the episode quietly suggests, is not what she would have wanted. The fourth vision is the actual life. The actual life is the one she got. The actual life is Richard. The actual life is the dilapidated house they could only afford because it was abandoned. The actual life is eating ramen out of a cup in a tiny apartment next to a train station. The actual life is finding out she was pregnant before she was married. The actual life is the wedding her parents did not attend, 2 empty seats reserved for them in the park. The actual life is bringing the baby home and Richard with a milk carton and a feeding tube taped to his chest, pretending to nurse the infant so that she could sleep. The actual life is Gumball's first steps. The actual life is Darwin's adoption. The actual life is the family photo. The actual life is at the end of the montage, this dinner, this pancake-coated kitchen, this food fight that is not yet started, this. The episode unfreezes. Nicole, having reviewed her parallel lives, begins to laugh. She picks up a can of whipped cream. She sprays it at Darwin. Gumball raises his hand and yells, "Food fight." Nicole corrects him. She says, "This is a food war." The family begins throwing food. The camera pulls back. The episode ends with the laughter audible and the kitchen entirely covered in the meal that was never eaten properly. What this episode is doing, on the level of philosophy, is the cleanest articulation of Camus' middle position the show ever attempts. Camus argues in Chapter 4 of The Myth of Sisyphus and again in The Rebel that human freedom is not the freedom to escape your situation. You cannot, by an act of will, become someone with different parents. You cannot, by an act of will, undo a marriage. You cannot, by an act of will, return to the day of the karate tournament and choose differently. What you can do every day is choose how you stand inside the life you ended up with. That choice, repeated, is what Camus calls absurd freedom. It is not the metaphysical freedom of being the author of your circumstances. It is the smaller, harder, daily freedom of being the audience of your circumstances who has decided to applaud anyway. Sisyphus, on the walk down the mountain, has the same freedom Nicole has in her kitchen. He cannot make the rock not be there. He can decide what posture to walk in. Nicole's posture at the end of the episode is laughter. The laughter is not a denial of the visions. The visions were honest. She could have been the president. She could have been the rich corporate wife. She could have been the safe middle-class wife. None of these would have given her this kitchen, this husband, this food war, this dinner. The episode is not arguing that her life is the best possible life. It is arguing, much more carefully, that her life is the life she has, and that the absurd hero's response to the life she has is to throw whipped cream at it, to be present to it, to declare a food war on it, to laugh. The laughter is, in the strictest possible sense, the reply that Camus says Sisyphus must give to the rock. There is a small narrative detail in this episode that almost no one mentions. Nicole's parents did not come to her wedding. The episode shows you the empty seats. For most of the show's run, you are allowed to assume that her parents disowned her. 2 seasons later, in an episode called The Parents, the show fills in the missing piece. Nicole's mother and father did try to attend the wedding. They misread the invitation. The invitation said RSVP. Nicole's parents, the episode reveals, drove to a small town in Moldavia called RSVP, mistaking it for a destination. The town does not exist in real life. The show invented it. The show invented it to give her parents an absurd reason for missing the wedding. The reason is, in every possible sense of the word, ridiculous. The reason is also, in the strict Camusian sense, true to how the universe works. The universe did not separate Nicole from her parents because of cruelty. The universe separated Nicole from her parents because of a misread address, a typo in the invitation, a confused honeymoon, a small off-key error that determined the rest of all of their lives. This is, when you slow down to look at it, the funniest and the saddest dramatization of contingency that the show ever attempted. The empty seats at the wedding were not the result of moral judgment. The empty seats were the result of a clerical accident. The clerical accident shaped 20 years of family estrangement. The clerical accident was all along the universe doing what the universe does. The universe was not punishing anyone. The universe was just imprecise. People filled in the imprecision with grievance. Camus would have, if he had been able to read this story, smiled. He would have written, in The Rebel or in one of the small late notebooks he kept until his death, that this is what the absurd is for. The absurd is not for nihilism. The absurd is a reminder that the people who hurt you did not, on the deepest level, have a plan. The universe did not hand them the script. They were guessing. They guessed wrong. You were guessing. You guessed wrong too. The wrongness is, on the philosophical level, the only genuinely shared thing between you. To know the wrongness is to know how little authority anyone has to demand explanations. Nicole's parents, in The Parents, get their daughter back, not because anyone apologized, but because the family realizes, slowly, that none of them remembers why the fight started. And the not remembering is, in the end, what permits forgiveness. The absurd has, in this corner of the show, made forgiveness possible by emptying the original quarrel of substance. The original quarrel was a typo. You cannot, on philosophical principle, be furious at a typo for 20 years. You can only laugh. The mother and the father walk back into their daughter's life, because the alternative, sustaining a feud that began as a clerical mistake, has become, even to them, absurd. Camus, in his closing pages, will make exactly this argument about the universe at large. The universe, in his account, is a typo. The universe was not configured by anyone. The universe is not punishing you for any specific failure of yours. The universe is just, in its small, indifferent way, miscoordinated with your hopes for it. Once you understand this, the urge to demand explanations disappears. There is no one to demand from. There is no one who knows. There is, in the silent universe, only you and the people you have happened to end up with, and the kitchen, and the family, and the choice of whether to laugh. Nicole's choice every Thursday night for 8 years was to laugh. Camus' choice in Occupy Paris in 1942 was to write a book that ends with the line, "We must imagine Sisyphus happy." The two choices are the same choice. They have, between them, the same emotional center, the same kitchen, the same wedding, the same rock. You can, if you want, draw a single line from the empty chairs at Nicole's wedding to the moment Sisyphus reaches the bottom of the mountain. The line is the same line. It is the line that says, this could have been different, but it was not. It says, the universe owes me an explanation, but the universe is not going to give one. It says, the only freedom I actually have is the freedom to decide how I am going to walk into the next moment. Nicole, looking at her family covered in pancake batter, decides to spray the whipped cream. Sisyphus, looking at the rock, decides to push. The deciding is what Camus is asking you, the reader of his essay, the watcher of his characters, to spend your one life doing. He does not promise you will be happy. He does not promise you anything. He just says, very plainly, that this is what is left. The deciding, the throwing of the cream, the pushing of the rock. The imagining of yourself, in the middle of all of it, happy. On June 24th, 2019, a Monday evening, Cartoon Network in the United States aired the 44th and final episode of the 6th season of The Amazing World of Gumball. It is the 240th episode of the original series. It is, although no one watching it that night was sure of this yet, the last episode that would air for the next 6 years. The episode is called The Inquisition. It runs 11 minutes. It ends on a cliffhanger that, for reasons no one could fully explain at the time, the show would not return to Resolve until July of 2025, when a revival series titled The Wonderfully Weird World of Gumball would premiere on Hulu and quietly pick up the dangling thread. The episode begins, as the show often did in Season 6, with Principal Brown, the school's headmaster, running through the halls of Elmore Junior High in a panic. He is shouting that the superintendent is coming. The teachers, gathered in their lounge, have no idea who the superintendent is. The school superintendent, in this episode, is a figure that does not, as far as anyone in Elmore can remember, have a precedent in their experience. He arrives, he is a tall man in a suit, he carries a clipboard, he speaks in measured, official tones. He is, the episode immediately makes clear, here on official business. The official business is the school's non-compliance. The school, the superintendent observes, has been operating in a way that violates several reality-based standards. The students are too cartoonish, the classes are too unstructured, the school's tone is, in his exact word, weird. He has come to bring the school into compliance. What he does, methodically, is begin transforming the students. Through some mechanism the episode never explains, the superintendent has the power to convert each cartoon student into a live-action human being. One by one, he transforms them. Masami the Cloud becomes a Japanese teenager. Tobias the Rainbow becomes a real boy. Tina the Dinosaur becomes a real girl. Penny, the show's romantic interest, becomes a young woman in a green sweater, animated as a frame-by-frame photographic insert into the cartoon classroom. The episode is on screen an unprecedented intrusion of live-action human bodies into a cartoon universe. The transformation is shown as both invasive and, in a strange way, almost respectful. The new humans are not monsters. They look like real 15-year-olds at a real middle school. They have, the show is suggesting, simply been made to fit a different production standard. They have been compliance-D. They are no longer cartoons. They are, in the universe of Elmore, dead. Gumball and Darwin, watching this from a distance, refuse to be transformed. They flee. They use their cartoon abilities to evade the now human students who have been deputized to capture them. Gumball gives himself extra legs. Darwin slips through air vents. They are, in their deteriorating cartoon way, the last two characters in the school still operating under the old visual rules. They eventually return to the school to rescue their friends. They use the friends' cartoon natures to break the transformation. They sing Banana Joe back into a banana. They make Sussy laugh until she becomes Sussy again. Gumball accidentally kisses Sarah the ice cream cone, mistaking her for Penny, which restores Sarah. The friends, restored, confront the superintendent. The superintendent, with the school turning back to cartoon, prepares to fight. He flees. He slips on a banana peel. The students surround him. They pull off his face. The face beneath the face is Rob. The whole episode has been Rob in disguise. Rob has been impersonating the superintendent. Rob is, behind the costume, the same one-eyed Cyclops with the static face that he has been since season 3. He is, in this final episode, performing the role of the system that wants to delete weirdness from the world. He has put on the suit of compliance. He has come to Elmore, his home, to convert it into a place that can be archived without controversy. He has come, in other words, to do to Elmore what the Void has been threatening to do for 6 seasons. He has come to make the show end. When his disguise is removed, Rob does not deny what he has been doing. He says, instead, that he has been trying to save them. He says that the transformation was their only chance to escape to what he calls the other place, before the show ends. He says, in a tone that for him is almost gentle, that they could have lived in the other place. They could have escaped. They could have, under his guidance, become real children in a real world, broadcasting on a network that does not delete its programs. The students do not understand. The students have never seen what is on the other side. Rob has. Rob, having spent 6 seasons climbing in and out of the Void, has been the only character in the show who fully understood what was coming. He has been, all along, the show's prophet of the cancellation. No one has, all along, listened. That night, alone in the darkened school, Rob is on the floor. He is regaining consciousness. He is, in voiceover, lamenting that the others did not let him save them. He says that the transformation was the only chance they had. As he speaks, the floor of the school begins to crumble. Beneath the floor, opening upward like a mouth, is the Void. The same TV static-edged, white expanse that contained Molly and the Keytar and the Hindenburg-style Zeppelin. The Void has come to Elmore. It is consuming the floor. It is consuming, beneath the floor, the school. It is consuming, beneath the school, the show. Rob, with no time to react, slips. He grabs the edge. He hangs. He looks down into the static. He looks up at where the school used to be. He says, in his last words of the original series, "Oh no, it started. The grip fails." He falls. The screen freezes on him in mid-fall, mouth open, body suspended over the static. A title card appears. The title card says, "To be continued." It is not continued. The episode ends. The credits roll. Cartoon Network, that night, schedules the next program. The Amazing World of Gumball goes off the air. It does not come back the following season. It does not come back the following year. The show creator Ben Boakley had announced years earlier that season 6 would be the last. The audience knew. The audience was supposed to know. What the audience had not known was that the show would end on the image of the universe of the show being, in literal screen terms, swallowed by the Void. The cancellation that Rob had been screaming about for 3 seasons, the metaphysical cancellation, the deletion of everything that did not comply, was finally arriving. It was arriving on screen. It was being broadcast as it happened. The last image was not a hug. The last image was not a sunset. The last image was a one-eyed Cyclops falling into a static-filled mouth, screaming that it had started. For the next 6 years, that was the show. You should, if you are still listening, sit with what this means structurally. The show's final aired image, before any revival, was the show's own setting being eaten by the Void of forgotten things. The villain who had spent 6 seasons warning the cast that this would happen was the only character on screen who understood what was happening. He was right. He had always been right. He was, in the philosophy he could not articulate, a Cassandra in a cartoon t-shirt. He had seen the absurd. He had failed to find a healthy way to live with it. he had become a believer in escape. And his belief in escape had, in the end, been justified because the escape was real and the world he was trying to escape was in fact ending. The void was real. The cancellation was real. The deletion was on its way. Rob fell into the very thing he had built his whole project around fearing. The screen froze. The show went off the air. To be continued. For 6 years, that final image was the most Camusian thing in the medium. It was Camusian because of how it was Camusian. It was not Camusian in the way a clever French film is Camusian. It was Camusian because the philosophical position of the show, after 6 years of broadcasting, had finally been taken to its furthest possible point. The show had begun in 2011 with a rejected toothpaste mascot named Gumball going to school. It had ended in 2019 with the show eating itself. It had begun with the absurd as background detail. It had ended with the absurd as plot resolution. It had, in 8 years, been an unbroken argument that the universe of Elmore was a fragile, incoherent, beautiful, doomed thing, and that the only honest response to its incoherence was to live inside it anyway. In its final episode, the show conceded that the doom was real. The void was no longer a metaphor. The void was the reality that the show had been built on. The show, in its last image, gave the void back the territory it had been holding off for 240 episodes. The void took it. The freeze frame held. To be continued. That kind of ending in the history of American children's television is almost without precedent. Most kids' shows end with a reunion, with a graduation, with a recap of the cast hugging in front of a frozen sunset. The amazing world of Gumball ended with its world consumed by the abstract logic of cancellation, with its main villain falling, screaming into the same void he had spent the show trying to climb out of. There is no comfort in this image. There is no resolution. The image is the philosophical position taken to its absolute conclusion. The show is, the image says, going to end. The show ending is the end. There is nothing else. To be continued is in this context the ironic flourish. The show is not going to be continued. The show was for 6 years simply over. What happened during the 6-year silence is, in a way the show could not have planned, the cleanest possible test of Camus' argument about Sisyphus. The audience in 2019 watched the show end on a freeze frame. The audience had no reason to believe the freeze frame would ever unfreeze. The audience, in the months and years that followed, kept the show alive in the only way an audience can. They re-watched the existing episodes. They wrote about the show. They mourned in low-grade internet ways that this strange and beautiful object had gone away. The show was, for the entire silence, a rock at the bottom of the mountain. No one was pushing it. No one had to push it. The show was, for the audience that had loved it, a thing that had ended, and the love for it was a thing that continued anyway. A low fire kept on without external justification. The audience did not know the show would come back. The audience kept showing up to the show that was no longer there. That, in a strange sociological way, is what Camus said the absurd hero does. The absurd hero loves something that is going to be taken back. The absurd hero loves it anyway. The absurd hero pushes the rock without expecting the rock to stay. Then, in 2023, at the Annecy International Animation Film Festival, a quiet announcement. The show would return. A 7th season would be produced the next year at the same festival. More details. The 7th season would resolve the void. It would, in an episode eventually titled The Rewrite, give the cliffhanger an answer. In May of 2025, the season would be retitled The Wonderfully Weird World of Gumball, branding it as a revival rather than a continuation, but contractually and creatively the same Bocklet show. On July 28, 2025, the new episodes premiered on Hulu in the United States. On October 6th of that year, they premiered internationally on Cartoon Network and HBO Max. The show was back, the freeze frame was over, Rob, finally, would land somewhere. What you can say about this revival, philosophically, is that it is the most Camusian outcome the show could have had. The show was canceled, the show was by the rules of the universe it had built, deleted. And then, the show came back. The void gave back what it took. This is not a mistake the show made. The show, in its return, did not pretend the cancellation had not happened. The new title even includes the word weird in place of amazing, as if to acknowledge that the show, having been to the void, can no longer pretend it is the same show that it was. It is wonderfully, knowingly, post-void weird. The original series ended on a freeze frame of philosophical despair. The revival begins by quietly resuming the falling motion that was frozen. Rob is still falling. The show is still resolving. The world is, in some real sense, the same world it was on June 24th, 2019. It has just been allowed by some force the show does not have to name, to keep going. The rock has rolled back. Sisyphus has, 6 years later, walked back to the bottom and started pushing. This is, when you take the long view, the only ending Camus would have been content with. Camus did not write a book whose moral was, life is meaningless, therefore give up. Camus wrote a book whose moral was, life is meaningless, therefore push the rock. The pushing is the meaning. The pushing is what Sisyphus has, and it is enough. The amazing world of Gumball, in its run, in its end, and in its return, has acted out the entire structure of this argument. It pushed the rock for 240 episodes. It watched the rock roll back, on screen, in a freeze frame, on a Monday in June of 2019. It walked for 6 years back to the bottom. It is, now, pushing the rock again. There is no final ending. There is only the cycle. The cycle is the show. The cycle is what every cartoon, every novel, every life that gets lived is on its deepest level. The cycle is what Camus said you should imagine yourself happy inside. You can, if you want, sit with the freeze frame for a moment. The Cyclops, with the static face, his body suspended over the white static, his mouth open, his one eye looking up at the ceiling that is no longer there, the school crumbling around him, the void beneath him opening. He is, in this moment, the show's last witness. He is, also, the show's first prophet. He has been right about the void his entire conscious life. The void is real. He is falling into it. The screen freezes. To be continued, and then, 6 years later, in a sentence Camus did not get to write, the freeze unfreezes. The show, against all odds, is continued. Rob lands. The void releases. The cycle starts again. Sisyphus, after a longer pause than usual, takes a step toward the bottom of his rock. He has stopped, briefly, expecting to be released. He has stopped, briefly, expecting an explanation. He has stopped, briefly, hoping for an end. He has accepted, in the silence, that the rock is going to be there tomorrow. He has, on this acceptance, become free. He walks down, the audience watching walks down with him. What you have, after 8 years and 240 episodes, and a 6-year silence and a revival, is not a children's show with a philosophical accident in it. What you have is a sustained piece of philosophical writing in animated form. The accident, if there is one, is that the writers and the network and the audience never had to call it that. The writers got to write about the absurd without using the word absurd. The animators got to draw the divorce between meaning and world without ever drawing a textbook diagram of it. The network got to broadcast what is, taken in full, the longest running and most successful absurdist meditation in the history of children's television, while believing at every step of the production that they were broadcasting a comedy about a blue cat. Ben Bocolet, gathering his rejected commercial mascots in 2009, did not set out to write a sequel to the myth of Sisyphus. He set out to make something funny that he could sell. He produced, by the strange logic that good art often follows, a work that is, in its bones, the same work Camus published in occupied Paris in October of 1942. The position the show takes, if you assemble it across all its episodes, is the position Camus took. The position is that the universe is not going to give you a reason to be alive. The position is that the people who tell you the universe will give you a reason are wrong, and that filling the silence with their reason will eventually shrink you. The position is that the only honest response is to live in the silence with your eyes open, and to take the small real things in front of you, the family at the table, the friend on the bench, the food fight in the kitchen, the cat with the dissolving arms walking back down the mountain, and to call those things enough. Not because they are objectively enough, they are not. They will, like everything else, eventually be eaten by the void. The point is that they are what is here. The point is that you, the viewer, the listener, the person on the other side of the screen, have only ever had what is here. There is no other place. The other place is what Rob believed in, and the other place did not save him. The other place is, in the end, the same void he was trying to escape. There is only this kitchen, this dinner, this mayonnaise, this rock. You started this video 2 hours ago with 2 children on a sidewalk in California asking the planets what the meaning of life was. The planets answered with a song about how meaningless your life is on a cosmic scale. Billions of years passed. The sun exploded. The solar system was destroyed. The boys on the sidewalk did not seem to be listening. They wandered off to ask someone else. They eventually sat next to a chin with eyes drawn on it, on a bench in a quiet park. The chin told them that the meaning of life was finding their own way to enjoy it. The chin then threw mayonnaise at pigeons. The boys laughed. That episode aired on a Thursday in 2015. It is, For almost everyone who watched it on broadcast, a half-remembered moment from childhood. The episode is, on closer reading, the entire argument of one of the most important philosophical books of the 20th century, played for laughs, written for kids, and broadcast on a basic cable channel in between commercials for breakfast cereal. The mayonnaise is the meaning. The pigeons are the universe. The bench is what is left. You are still on it. The show, against every reason it had to be canceled, is still going. If you found something worth carrying away from this, subscribing helps the channel keep going. And it costs nothing. Sleep well. The next one will be along soon.